Is 7 o'clock, so we are gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really excited to have you all here for our webinar, Learning Beyond Four Walls. We've got four really wonderful panelists here today that I'm very excited to have the opportunity to introduce you all to. And we'll get to hear from them about their experience teaching kids outside and get to learn from their expertise. So feel free to think of some questions that you'd love to ask them at the end, and we'll have the chance to share some wisdom here together. Before we get too far along, I do just want to take a second to point out a couple things in Zoom in case Zoom hasn't been your platform of choice recently. When I shared my screen, it might have gone full screen for you. I typically recommend that you exit full screen. You can do that by finding the View Options button. This is going to allow you to dock the chat window to the side of your screen so you can see what everybody is sharing in the chat window. To find the chat window, you're going to look for the little speech bubble icon and go ahead and click on that. And then the last step is over here right above where you type, there's a little drop down. And I recommend that you switch that to say to everyone so that we can see what each other are saying. And if you have resources or ideas that you want to share or add to in the chat window, you can go ahead and do that there. And so let's go ahead and practice using that chat window. I see folks are already in there doing this, so this is fantastic. Share with us where you are located, where you're coming to us from. And if you want, what kind of educator you are as well. So I'm coming to you from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and participatory science focused on birds and nature. And my name is Kelly Schaefer, and I'm the outreach coordinator with the K-12 education team. And we get to package all of the really cool stuff that the lab does and help make that more available to educators. And we do that in a few different ways. So we create innovative resources and deliver transformative trainings that empower educators to build young people's science skills through nature, participatory science, and inquiry. And today we're going to focus a lot on that nature piece and on building youth's nature connection. All of the resources and trainings that we preside really fall somewhere along these three pillars: nature connection, participatory science, and inquiry investigations. So we're really about getting kids outside, connecting to science by doing authentic science. And all of our resources are going to touch on one or more of these pillars. And today we're really going to hit that nature connection piece and share some ideas about how we can get youth connected to nature and birds and yeah, minds-on, hands-on learning. So we are going to talk about some benefits of outdoor learning before we get too far along. And I just want to throw this question out to you. What are some personal benefits that you've experienced from spending time outdoors? Feel free to share your thoughts in the chat window. For me, I always find spending time outdoors to be like a really grounding experience. If my life feels chaotic, if I spend time outside watching birds or looking for amphibians, I find that I start to feel more connected to the world and my body, and it just helps me get back into uh, my right mind. I see sanity coming up in the chat window, and absolutely, I agree with that for sure. I see Bethany's mentioning focused attention and wonder. Elizabeth's seconding that sense of wonder. Yeah, I see folks saying that students are less likely to be playing on their phones when they're teaching outdoors, seeing attention benefits, enjoying time with nature, getting in touch with your spiritual side, having the opportunity to de-stress. Absolutely. And all of these things that we experience in our personal time outdoors, a lot of these benefits our students see as well. So there's a really robust body of research that shows that our students can really benefit from outdoor learning, from spending time in green spaces. So these graphics are both from the Children in Nature Network. And if you ever are looking for, a way to justify getting outside to your administration, you can check out this website, childrenandnature.org, and I'll share that link in the chat window here in a moment and get access to these graphics. And you can see that students experience better academic performance, spending time outside. You see that spending time outdoors in classrooms can help enhance creative thinking and critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, increase focus and attention. You can see a decrease in disruptive behaviors, an increase in impulse control. You can also see increased enthusiasm for learning as well as greater engagement with that learning. So all of these things that we kind of know about ourselves, that we feel more connected to ourselves and our thoughts, and we experience less stress, our students are really getting those benefits when we teach outside as well. And there's all sorts of great social emotional things that are happening if you get to spend time outdoors as well. Lots of great social skills that are getting developed. So not just academic, but whole child things are happening when you get to spend time learning outdoors. Yeah, so we also see like these relationship skills that are happening. So if kids are problem solving outside, it provides a really great opportunity for them to engage in cooperative play, and it provides them with the opportunity to learn to manage risk, manage their own bodies in these settings. So it's just all these really wonderful benefits that we see from spending time outdoors. And one of the things I like to bring up is that it's also an equity and justice issue. There was this really great paper that came out shortly after the pandemic that was looking at the benefits of spending time outdoors for folks that don't always have access to the outdoors. And so there are a lot of studies that show that nature's benefits are relatively greater for those who are negatively impacted by economic disadvantage, systemic racism, trauma, opportunity gaps, and other challenges. So we can think of having access to green spaces as an opportunity to provide more equity to our students. And so that's definitely something that I really value and think is great to consider when you are finding ways to get your students outside and engaging in learning outdoors. Now, you didn't come here to listen to me, so I want to make sure that our panelists have plenty of time to share their resources and their thoughts as well. So I would like to turn the stage over to Amy. Amy Ferguson is a third grade teacher in the City School District of New Rochelle. She's taught a lot of different grades through her experience, but I love her philosophy for teaching, which really focuses on academic success, being available when curriculum is differentiated, student confidence is strengthened, and learning is fun. So, Amy, if you would like to unmute and go ahead, we'd love to hear more from you.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So, being outdoors, it's important. I mean, one of the first things, as I'm an elementary school teacher, but I work with all age levels, and I enjoy working with different kinds of educators and people from different disciplines. And being part of this panel was so important to me because I really believe in the importance of outdoor learning. I see the benefits of it, not only for my students, but also for the adults and for me. And it brings me back to the past. As a child, I loved being outdoors, and as I grew older, I always immersed myself in different activities happening outdoors. So why not bridge my passion for teaching with something I always do on a regular basis? So I decided to just have my kids do a lot of outdoor activities, and some of them are listed here, such as the scavenger hunts, data collection, writing, and the arts, and some others you see on the screen. But I just want to talk to you about the different ways I did these activities. So for the scavenger hunts, I may have said, okay, find something in nature that is green. Find something in nature that matches this leaf I'm holding. Find something in nature that makes you feel happy. So there were like different ways of me doing it. In some instances, I presented it with pictures. Others instances, I presented verbally, as I just did now. Others I did as a checklist. And I've actually used this activity with family events as well. And it really was a nice bridge. So, one my great way that I saw, wow, this really is impactful, is when there was a rose in our school garden. And when the family members like, oh, Rose, Rose, Rose. So it was that bridge of language, which was really nice, where everyone felt connected. Um, and other other scenarios, the children were so surprised to what they found. I found this too. Why are there so many of them? I don't know. So we started to pay attention to more of the observations. And in terms of the descriptive writing, there's something that happens in the fall called Poetry Out Loud. And it's about a 2-week program where um, they give you different ideas, the website, on what you can talk about in terms of poetry. And it is a promise that you will be outdoors for the 2 weeks writing. And I did it for the first time this year, and it was fantastic. The first day, my students were running all over the place. But then afterwards, they realized that this was a daily activity. And I started to pay attention to their sit spots. I started to pay attention to if they like to be around other people, if they want to be alone, um, what words came to mind. And as we kept doing this along the weeks, their language kept building. They started to add more. They started to realize that there are ways of doing work, and it can feel comfortable, and it doesn't only have to be within the 4 walls. So that was really, really good. And I'm definitely going to do that some next year as well. It's open to everyone nationally. In terms of observations, this is really good. You could talk about what you see, how many, the color, the size, the shape, the location, the movement. So more, it goes back to that descriptive language. Um, and then in terms of identification, you could use hand lens. You can make your own lens. It gives children that idea of perspective, which is really good. And you could build on like teaching them modeling and really sitting with an object or something where they could just look at it for longer than a minute. So these are some ideas, but I'm definitely I want to talk more, but I know I have some other slides. And as I keep going on, I'll add some more ideas. So we can move on. So with all of this work outside, there are a lot of surprises. And I think when you go outside often, you'll realize how many surprises there are. Because, like with my students, they went to the same tree. Some of them, they're like, "Oh, look, a leaf's missing," or something like that. And they noticed changes. And you don't see changes if you don't do it over and over again. So it goes back to that, a lot of their NGSS standards, the cross-cutting concepts, patterns. This is really huge. So being outdoors, you could really learn a lot about the different patterns. Also, community building. You start to learn about people. Like I learned about my students, what they liked. Um, they start to openly talk to me about subjects that I never heard of them talk about. Like, with my family, this is where we typically sit. This is where we lay down. This is what we do. Oh, Miss Ferguson, um, you should really lay on some leaves. It feels good. So it's that sort of stuff that, you feel so connected. And I just realized, that what they realize is also learnings everywhere. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so some tips. So let's go back to that first time I took my children out for Poetry Out Loud. They were so excited. And, as a teacher, I always want the excitement to happen. I also have to manage them, for their safety. So I learned a few tips along the way, and it has worked with children as young as 6 years old all the way to 18. So you could just adjust it. But, one thing I've noticed is giving multiple tasks. So we go outside. If I say, we're going to do a rock collection. After every 5 minutes, I'll have a meeting spot. Okay. When you hear me clap 3 times, come back to the swings or come back to the bench. That really helps them. And it also helps me, break apart the different assignments so I know where everyone is at, where we could have a conversation. And then based on what we did before, we could use that information for the next task. Having partnerships sometimes is helpful. I usually have an area where I'm just like, okay, stay around here where I could see you. Naturally, people get lost in the wild. People get lost in outdoors. It brings out beautiful things. Um, Sometimes for safety reasons, you have to just have a partner just to make sure everyone is staying at a place where an adult can watch them and they can come back. Movement exercises. So I wanted my children to be excited about what they're doing. So instead of saying, stop, slow down, I would say, skip to the tree, hop to the bird you're hearing. I would do all these different movements, and it does help. It really does help. So these are some ideas that came up that I think you all can think of. And I just want you to know that outdoor learning, in closing, if anyone asks you why, and you have to bring in those standards, it touches upon phenomena, that wonder, asking, wow, what is that? You can practice, claim evidence, and reasoning. It touches upon the observations. So much of the standards do cover this work that you could find outside, and it's more impactful. And till this day, my students talk about their experiences outside being very good. So thank you for your time, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. I love the image of telling students, giving them emotion and a place to go and having them skip to the tree. I think that's so fun. Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. Next up, we will be handing over to Keandra. And Keandra is an educator and bird nerd. Hope you don't mind, Keandra. I'm taking the liberty of calling you a bird nerd. She is a full-time science and birding educator for junior high students in urban Anaheim. And she also teaches part-time for the Emeritus Institute at Saddleback College. So Keandra, please come on and unmute and take the podium.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And Kelly is a fantastic bird nerd herself, and we've had some excellent adventures and seen some really cool birds. Okay, let me share my screen. And there we go. Okay, so hello. Um, I get paid to talk about birds and teach about birds. I cannot think of anything better. I also have to teach science just because I'm forced to. Just kidding. It's really fun. And so I actually started using outdoor stuff with my science students and then developed the urban ornithology class from that. So a little bit about my school. It's very urban in Anaheim, which, you know, we always hear it's the happiest place on earth. That's a bit of a stretch. But we do have just 2 grades, around 1,200 students in those 2 grades. My class sizes average around 38 students. And this can sound very daunting when thinking about taking classes that large outside, but I'm here to let you know it can be done relatively safely and effectively, and we have fun. Putting in perspective the urban nature of this, and I know I saw a lot of people that are writing from urban areas, so you can still implement the outdoor ed with those areas. So the star is my school, and then the duck, that's where the ducks play. It was more fun to put a rubber ducky than a hockey puck. Then we were right down the street from Angel Stadium and right down the street from Mickey Mouse, otherwise known as Disneyland. And then this is important for what I'm going to share. We do have a body of water. It's lined in cement, but there is water nearby with a freeway in between. So looking at this, when I became a birder in 2014, and I said, I want to take my students birding, and everybody said, well, where are you going to go? Because I always had this idea that if you're doing outdoor education, you need to go somewhere, but I couldn't, just the time and just where we are. I mean, where are we going to go? So I just said, well, we're just going to walk around campus and see what birds are there. And again, looking at this graphic, people just said, well, you're going to see pigeons and crows and maybe some gulls. And they were right. We do see all of those things, okay? But it just keeps getting better. So we are up to 127 species on my campus on this Anaheim area. And thinking about why that is so incredible and so important to these kids and getting them outside seeing these 127 species, we have a really diverse population, and there's a lot of challenges that these students are facing, with 90% considered socioeconomically disadvantaged. These are from last year. We're actually up at about 15% that are unhoused. We have a higher foster youth. These are the most recent things I could get, though, for a screenshot. So it's a very, very diverse group. The students who are considered English learners, those are the ones that they are very much still learning English. And then we have many, many, many more who have been redesignated as English proficient. So what I have found with outdoor education, and this is both taking my students birding, which we do once a week on campus, and also with my science students going outside for a variety of things, is looking at it from an equity lens. All of the students are learning the new language of the species that we're observing, whether it's plant or animal. When you ask 7th graders the name of a bird, they're not generally going to know. They might know, oh, that's a crow, or that's a black and white bird, but they won't know, oh, that's a black phoebe, or every 7th grade's boy's favorite bird, the bush tits, which are all over campus. So the language, it evens the playing field. The names, both in Latin and in English, are new for everybody. Socioeconomic aspects, being outside is free. And we all have the same playing field there, and we can all observe, whether it's with our eyes or our ears or whatever senses we are focusing on that day. Academics, I have a lot of students, especially in my birding class, that are just put in there, and it doesn't matter if they don't have the best grades or if they are the 4.5 student. Everybody's on a level playing field because we're looking at nature. You don't have to have certain GPA. It's available to everybody. And one of the interesting things is I have noticed that some of my top birders outside and observers outside when I look at their class grades, they really, really struggle, but they feel success when they are outside. Looking at it from the 504s and IEPs, that is another amazing thing I've noticed with birding and just being outside is sometimes things that are labeled as a disability, it actually is really, really, really helpful when you are doing observations. So my students that have trouble sitting still, they are outstanding outside. If they are constantly looking around, they're really good at spotting birds. Having any form of like a hyperfixation on something, they are absolutely amazing at noticing tiny, minute details that really enhance observational collection. With the observations and data, we do use eBird, and the students quite literally cheer when they see our list get submitted, and on the submission map, which I have going right now, when they see our yellow dot light up, they get so excited because they know, hey, we did that, we contributed that. And it's amazing. They really feel part of a larger world when they are seeing these submissions that other people, like there's California, they feel that connection. Looking at change over time and seasonal variation has been really important for my program as well, because again, you brought up that you have to be able to prove why are we doing this and connect it back to NGSS standards or claim evidence reason. We can actually look at real data, and for example, I can show this and say, okay, I can pose a question. What 4 months have the most brand new species added? And they will very quickly see that it's October, November, March, or October, November, April, and May. And then we get to look at why. Why do you think that we have the most brand new species show up during those months? And then it leads to a discussion about migration. And so it can bring in so many different real world examples, and it's concrete data. It's not just a worksheet with some made up word problems. By the way, I said 127 species. I stand by that. This only says 126 because the bald eagle, which is our mascot that flew over from the aforementioned water, I didn't have a list going at school. I was standing at the water and I called my friends at school and I said, make the kids look up. And they did, and they saw the bald eagle. So 127 species. With the, here we go. Sketch and write. So this was already alluded to before. You can take the notebooks outside and give them choices. They can choose to draw what they're learning or write about what they're learning or combine it. For the English learners, I let them do it in their own home language, and then we translate it when we get inside. So a lot of building of skills about real things that they are looking at. Also, like Amy, I use games. We also do scavenger hunts. We do bingo, photo challenges, which goes with the scavenger hunt. So I do the same thing, like find something that's about as tall as you, but they have to go with either on their own or with a team. I let them choose. Not everybody wants to be in a group. And they take their Chromebook and they take a picture with it next to the plant. And they have so much fun. Species bingo. I will go out before school, and this morning I had 21 bird species between my car and my classroom. So I noted them down, and I'll show it to the students and I'll say, pick 9, make a bingo card. And then we'll go out with binoculars and bingo cards, and they'll actually be very invested in which species we're seeing. With the campus involvement, I have found that with outdoor education, a lot of times not a lot. It is often not particularly well received unless the rest of the campus knows what's going on. If they see a group of 38 students wandering around campus, they might think we're up to no good because I'm shorter than all of my students. So they often can't see me. So they're like, why are those kids outside? So we involve them in the program. I send out, well, I've created, and the kids can add to it, but a picture bird guide for our campus. And it it like shows all 127 species. We give credit to the photographers. We add new species. And I share this. This is 26 pages long. I share it with the entire staff at the end of every quarter. So the whole staff is involved. They get so excited when we get something new. Like they were freaking out when we got yellow-billed cuckoo this year because one has never been reported on eBird in Anaheim, and it showed up at my school. So then the whole staff is involved, and what I've noticed is that the kids actually share what they are learning with the adults, and it's building relationships on campus that I just beyond anything I could have imagined. If you walk around my campus, we are truly the only school in the area where everybody's looking up. Not everybody is looking at a screen. Everybody's searching for birds. And we have, again, about 1,200 students. Then with the funding, this was a big stumbling block for me until I realized, wait, there are funds out there. And so I've used a variety of funding to get a class set of binoculars, and they break frequently because these are 7th graders. So we just keep reapplying through these funding sources, either donors choose for grants. The binocular grant, I just saw, Kelly, that you just had some winners announced for that recently. I go to my school site council every single year and ask for another 12 to 15 pairs of binoculars. They run about $200 a pair, and they approve it because I can prove, look at all this great science we're doing. I'm almost done. The aha moments. So it's been shocking to me. What I didn't realize was how much of this nature desert was in these students' lives. When I had an 8th grader, we were out looking at birds, and we had a turkey vulture or something above us, and he says, "Wow, I've never seen that before." I said, "Oh, you've never seen a vulture before?" And he goes, "No, I've never seen a bird flying." This is a 14-year-old student, and that was really eye-opening to me. I think prior to that, that was several years ago, I had made assumptions that, well, yeah, maybe they're just not learning the species, but of course they're noticing animals and nature. No. And so explicitly giving them opportunities just to be outside. With students in gangs, we have 31 different gangs represented in my junior high and in the neighborhood, and they are bussed in from different areas. We work closely with the Anaheim Police Department and various other organizations. And sometimes what I have seen is my students who are already affiliated or who have older brothers or sisters who are affiliated they don't speak in class, but they latch on to being outside. And after they realize that there are behavior expectations in place, they get very, very focused on the birds, and they will quietly come up to me, and it's the only time I hear them speak all quarter. It's a 9-week class, and they will tell me the names of the birds that they saw or that they're currently looking at. It is amazing. The language gets really entertaining, but they get really excited. And so that's been exciting. And then the lasting impacts, I have had, I've had students that have gone on to college and beyond or have graduated, and they all come back. Even if it wasn't my birding class, just my science class, they all come back and say what they remember most is going outside. What they remember most is looking at birds. Even if they weren't in my bird class, they pay attention. It is a campus culture at this point in time. It's been dramatic for our whole campus. Tips, Amy touched on some of these as well. I have found the hard way, it's really important to keep the class together, at least with junior high. I famously had a student wander off once when I was first starting this program, and he disappeared for a few minutes, and I didn't know where he went. And then the police showed up, and it turns out he was burying $10,000 in cash under a pile of leaves while we were birding. So I would recommend keeping the class together. It worked. I do not ever, ever, ever let them have phones or backpacks outside. That also ends badly. Yeah, we don't allow phones on campus, but they all bring them anyway. Um, I assign points every time we're outside. It's not just a free for all. This is an assignment. You have an explicit objective. Please draw 4 different leaves and write about what adaptations each one has. Okay. Or, it's something like that. If we're birding, please make a list of all your species. Student choice. Do they want to work alone? Do they want to work with a partner? Do they want to do it in English? Do they want to do it in their other language and then translate it? I have found it helpful to front load which species we're going to be looking for if it's my birding class. And if it's my science class and we're looking at flowers, we'll go over which species of flowers we're going to be searching for on campus, and not to touch them, not to pick them, and not to eat them. And then for those of you, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we do need to switch to the next person.
Okay,
so do you want to just wrap up with a final thought for us?
Yep, that's the end. I'm at the end. Yep.
Thank you so much. That was so wonderful. And I really love how much you're involving the other staff and the whole campus in the experience. I think that's really wonderful.
Oh, we have fun.
Okay, I'm going to steal the screen share back.
Yeah.
All
Okay,
right.
there we go.
I think we've got it. Awesome. All right. So next up we have Jeffrey Train, and Jeff was a teacher in residence for us one summer during the pandemic. And we're very excited to have him back to share some about his experience here. He has got amazing experience both in teaching about birds, but also in teaching kids outside. So Jeff, do you want to go ahead and take the podium?
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. I love being a part of an evening like this. It was wonderful to hear from both Keandra and Amy, just kind of the opportunity to kind of experience the joy and enthusiasm that, being an educator can allow for. And all of the energy that's already been shared, I kind of concur with all of it. I wanted to begin today. So I watched a documentary recently on John Williams, and Duke Ellington had a great line. He said, "There's no there's 2 types of music, good music and bad music." And I was like, oh, I love that formulation. So I'm going to try to use that formulation as much as possible. And so in thinking about what to say tonight, I definitely think there's 2 types of teachers: those who take their students into nature and those who should. I think everybody who's taken kids outside to learn has seen how it really kind of generates a spark, and you can't recreate that in the classroom, no matter what subject you're teaching. And so one of the things that I've been aware of, I've been teaching now for 20 years. I teach in a suburban district in New Jersey, and I also do a lot. I live in Hoboken, and so I lead a lot of bird walks. I teach classes in Hoboken, and I teach in surrounding cities. And so, and I teach both high school seniors who are, just about to leave for college, young adults, but I also work with young children, from kindergarten. And one of the things that I'm aware of when I'm a teacher in my classroom, when I take the students outside, I've always had this feeling like I was doing something wrong, that the teachers seeing me with my students heading outside are going to be thinking that we're not working, or we're not doing something worthwhile. The administrator, if they see me, is going to be, is this like break time? And I think that's a natural bias that a lot of us have. And so I definitely wanted to talk about it a little bit. And I think every time you step outside, you're kind of challenging that assumption. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had a day where it snowed outside, and I was watching from my classroom as a group of students were heading with sleds to this big hill on campus. And I was like, I wonder what's going on. And all of a sudden, they start racing down this hill. with their teacher. And because I'm aware of this bias and I'm thinking, I'm saying, oh, I wonder who that is. And one of my students said, oh, it's Mr. E. He's a physics teacher. And they were calculating, the motion and, how the weight of something and the slope of the hill would relate to speed. And I thought that's such a cool idea, right? And that's a teacher being spontaneous, capitalizing on a snowy day, doing something fun, and those kids are going to remember that lesson forever. And so anytime I step outside, if I do feel on the back of my neck like, oh, what are people thinking of this? I remind myself that's okay. In many ways, it's just my thoughts about it. No one actually has ever said anything to me, and embrace that idea. Believe that by taking your students outside, you are doing something worthwhile. And kind of what I've seen is that we have this bias, which is that in order for things to be high achieving or worthy of study or like rigorous, I think we tend to believe that they have to be painful or not fun or separate from enjoyment. And that's not true. That it's If you think of the times, the moments in your life where you've learned the most, you were probably also enjoying it, right? You were probably having a blast. And so it's okay to have a blast and learn at the same time. That's really kind of our goal, I think. And so every time you step outside, keep confident, challenge those biases. And also, that idea, I don't have time for this. In many ways, I flip it. Like I don't have, I don't, I I don't have time to not do this. Basically, it's so important. It's so crucial. The time that I build that relationship with my students, where I teach them that there's a yellow-bellied sapsucker on campus. Those moments of joy creates buy-in, so that back in the classroom, they're more willing to embrace the lessons that we're doing there. So really, really valuable, I think. Uh, I would always say, and I tell this to people, start small. Just because you're inside doesn't mean nature can't be there as well. And so I think going outside is actually capitalized upon when you make it a part of your classroom. Great book called What the Robin Sees. And in that book, the writer talks about having a sit spot. And it started to dawn on me that my window in my classroom is a sit spot, right? It's a piece of nature that I can look at each and every day and notice the changes year in and year out. There's two, and I have a courtyard from my view, and there's these two trees. And I tell the students that when I first started teaching 20 years ago, those trees were as tall as me, and now I'm, looking up at them. Definitely, I love to do journal entries at the beginning of class, and so I'll ask things like, "What's your favorite season? What are some things that you notice in fall? What do you like about the snow? What do you enjoy about trees? What's your favorite tree and why? What's your favorite fish and why?" Just getting kids to, if you just ask a blanket statement, who enjoys nature? Yes or no, you're going to get a couple hands. But kids start to realize, oh, I've never thought about a tree before. I guess I really like, I don't know the name of that tree that's out on my lawn, but I love how in spring, it explodes with pink flowers. And then you can kind of talk about, oh, let's guess what that species is. It has a name. I love the classroom bird list. I unfortunately cannot compete yet with 127 species. My classroom list, though, my highest number just from my window is like 31 species right now. But I totally agree. I think it's so wonderful. And at the beginning of the year, I'll say to my students, just so you know, I'm a birder. I love looking for birds, but I need permission from you because at some point during the year, a crested caracara may fly past our window. And if you're expressing an idea I'm going to have to hold it in and not express it in the moment. Or if you give me permission today, know that I'll call everybody's attention to the bird, we'll enjoy it, and then I'll return to your idea there. And I say, if anybody has a problem, see me after class, let me know. No one ever does. People, they really enjoy it. They really enjoy that moment. The Cornell live cams, I love those, particularly right now because it's just before the nesting season. And so we look at the feeder cams, we look at the live cams, and then you kind of get to talk about nature and how it progresses and as a gradual kind of patient thing. And then as much as possible, again, kind of looking at those windows. And then as often as possible, you really want to create as many opportunities and experiences as you can. Start to think of how can I take this lesson that I've been teaching in the classroom and move it outside? What's something that I can do? Like push yourself to see it from a new perspective. Every once in a while, we do wellness days at my school. And for a couple of wellness days, I went to presentations and then I said, you know what? We should do a forest bath and go bird walking. And so you put that, I contacted the administration and said, I'm going to run a bird walk. And now it's become kind of a tradition, every other year kids sign up for this bird walk and it's a day that I look forward to. So be on the lookout for those things. Kelly, would you mind just clicking my, thank you. What do I have, like 4 minutes left? Cool beans. So, I guess it's kind of becoming the theme of the night. Birds, birds, birds. I definitely believe that they're just this great way to the foot in the door, basically. No matter where you are, right? In the suburbs, in an urban environment, there's a bird there, right? The birds are our neighbors. They kind of live with us, all around us. And there's just so much potential. You can talk about changes. You can talk about migrations, right? And what those mean and the symbols, the nesting season, communication and sounds. You've already heard some of those things. And I will concur with Keandra that same kind of thing. I noticed the enthusiasm. Students start to learn these names. They share them. One of my favorite things is when a student walks in and says, "Oh, Mr. Train, I took a picture of this bird. Can you help me identify it?" Or I identified this bird for somebody at home. That's really kind of taking those lessons and showing me that they're listening, that they're sticking with that, retaining that information and then applying it to other places. I do love when I take my students outside to prime them with an idea. So I may say something like, take a minute and think of what you're feeling right here, right now in the classroom. Scale of 1 to 5, a specific emotion, totally subjective. Think about it. And then we go outside, finish the bird walk, come back in, take a minute. How are you feeling? Allowing them to kind of feel that visceral change. Also make a prediction, and you heard some of those predictions already from some of the other speakers. Find something that's going to make you happy. Find something that is going to remind you of X, Y, and Z. Or how many species do you think we're going to see, right? There's a little bit of that competition, I think, that comes from that, which is like a positive, healthy competition, but also it gets them kind of familiar with making a prediction, which is, just as important for being a good reader as it is to being a good scientist. So that's really, really helpful. And then opportunities to record or reflect, I always think that's very helpful. I'm very big in that if we're going to go outside and do an activity, I want them focused in the moment and enjoying that. And then they can record and do something after the fact. And I know it is helpful sometimes to do like scientific jotting down, and that's wonderful. And I have used that before, but I do see, I like to change it up from time to time. And then the last thing I'll say is I agree with what's been said in terms of, following the standards. Always important to find a standard, to link it to what you're doing. And I also think it's very healthy and beneficial that it's okay to go outside, take a breath, relax, recharge, and then to go do what you got to do. That's an adult skill, right? It's something we all do ourselves. And so teaching that to our students is really teaching them how to be human beings. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was awesome. All right, and now I would love to turn it over to our last panelist. Bethany Ricks is a lifelong learner, a naturalist, a storyteller, and an artist. And I would love to have you take the podium, Bethany.
Got to share. There we go.
Perfect.
As Kelly mentioned, I kicked myself back out of here again. There we go. I work as the naturalist program coordinator for Minneapolis Park and Recreation. So I guess I'm kind of representing the non-formal side of things tonight. Um, in my role, it's kind of an odd one. I work with a program called the Neighborhood Naturalist Program, which offers about 50 to 60 hours of programming per week with a staff of 5 naturalists and 2 coordinators, so not too bad. And what's kind of odd is we don't have a site. So a lot of my week looks like loading wagons and putting things in the trunks of cars as we go to parks all over Minneapolis. The Minneapolis Park Board has 185 properties, 49 recreation centers, 8 regional parks, and there's a huge amount of diversity between these different sites. So we are providing environmental education in prairies and forests and near lakes and also at ball fields. And what does it look like to engage with nature in these places that are really ecologically rich and diverse and these places that are less so. But nature is still there. There's still nature to engage with. So it can be really interesting and challenging. And it's one of the other really cool things about what we do is we go to the same places week after week. So most of our programming is 1 hour long, and we're going back to the same audience again and again and again, which means that like I have toddlers in my programs who I've known since they were infants because their older siblings were in my programs. So it's just a really interesting community building experience. What I did was went through every photo I've ever taken at this job and then coded them and found the themes that I saw emerging in this work. Because I think there's a lot that we can share from the work that we do. There we go. Something that we've already heard come up several times is the importance of establishing a clear home base. And also one of the things I do is establish a call together clue. I know Amy mentioned like clapping 3 times. I use a squirrel call a lot of the time. That's this little strange looking thing on the right there. I'll also sometimes do verbal cues. I carry a triangle in my teaching bag at all times because that's a sound that really pierces and gets attention if the folks have wandered beyond the reach of my relatively small voice. And having a home base, like you've all said, is really important in terms of being able to know you can go out and explore and you can come back. For me, I'm also working with a huge variety of ages. So in the middle, I have a setup for a group of mostly 18-month-olds and they're grown-ups. We're exploring nature sounds. So we've got bamboo for drumsticks and we're gonna wander the park drumming on stuff and see what happens. What sounds do we hear? And we'll explore together as a group. But when I say, let's go back to the mat, the 18-month-olds know what that means and they will focus right back and return. I don't super recommend the puzzle mats I have here. These were just what we had when I started in my role. I purchased several inexpensive machine washable picnic blankets and went to the hardware store and got a grommet kit. And we use lawn staples so that blanket can't, there's always going to be the kid who wants to roll up inside of it. It's not going to be roll upable. So we use picnic blankets, we use outdoor mats, all sorts of things just to have, here's the place where we meet, we go out, we explore, we come back. one of the things we often do, especially in a first program, is make a map of our area. And this serves a whole bunch of different purposes, one of which is engaging with this space in a different way. If this park has always been, this is the place where I go and I run around and I scream, that's not what we're going to do, and we need to reset. It's okay. Those are all important things to do, but that's not what this time is. Um, it also helps us with setting boundaries, getting to know where it is that we're exploring, and oftentimes it becomes a long-term activity so that we can record as we learn more about this space. And suddenly, oh, this is where we saw this really cool bird, or this is where we found this awesome plant, or this place was flooded this week and isn't this week. What? And what does that mean? So it's a really just fun way to engage with the different parks that we work with. And these are two different maps of the same park. If you haven't read Map Making with Children by David Sobel, it's incredible for working with map making for kids of all ages. We do a lot with buckets and trays. We collect a lot of stuff, and that applies for the youngins. That's great for my 18-month-olds, but my elementary school kids love gathering things up and putting them in buckets. I get adults excited about collecting pine cones and noticing the differences between them. When was the last time you really sat and engaged with a pine cone? It can be incredible. So a lot of the things that I haul around most are buckets and like small, almost like lunch trays. And we can sort through all sorts of things in this. I apologize for the cockroach if you were not prepared and if you aren't comfortable with them. But one thing we'll often do, especially with our ambassador animals, is offer kids the chance to observe through drawing, which I know that several of you have talked about before. I love seeing what it is that kids notice and what it is they choose to record. So this was a camp for 7 to 11-year-olds. Move myself backwards there. And I love seeing, that this child on the right was really noticing the spikiness of the legs. And on the left, they were noticing the differences between the males and the females of the cockroaches. In the middle I just got my watercolors out and I had some fun one day. I love engaging with this as well. And I love seeing the different marks on the one that I put in the very center, seeing all of those spots and the darkness of the head versus the lightness of the body. I want to encourage engaging with the seasons. On the left, I had we haven't had enough snow this winter. I really wish we had. But on the left, I had a park that pretty much became this ice laboratory. Here, the ice is shattery. Here, the ice is very clear. Here, the ice is very spotty. Why? How is it different in different places? And maybe really just got into ice. Some kids chose to make mud paint in the picture on the right, which was very fun in a springtime context. Nobody seemed to be bothered that we drew on the sidewalk with mud. Forgiveness, permission, something. Getting up close can be of huge value. We also, every one of my naturals has a set of hand lenses that they use, and we look at lichen, we look at the spines of echinacea. The one on the right kind of weirds me out. It's a basketball. But it was something that was in the park. And taking a close look, yes, it is a basketball. Taking a close look can be really surprising. And just an interesting way to explore. On this particular day, I was working with a bunch of kids in an after-school program, mostly K through 2nd. And the number of kids who their parents came to pick them up and they were like, can I show you this? It was a really remarkable level of engagement. Wet and dry turns out to be an amazing experiment for a lot of different ages. So I'll bring just spray bottles with water. Kids will notice something while it's dry, spray it, come back a little later, has it changed? In this case, they sprayed the lower part of the tree and then didn't spray the upper part of the tree. And we saw how the colors of the lichen and the shape of the lichen changed, both looking normally and then looking through a hand. If all else fails, like when it gets too cold to be outside, like it was in Minnesota yesterday, all of our schools were canceled because the wind chills were like 20 to 30 below. We can bring the outside in. On the right is a partial picture of a tree limb that it was a windy day. I found it next to my car. Luckily didn't break anything. I threw it in the trunk of my car and brought it to a group, and they just were astonished and immediately engaging with, why is this part different than this part? This part's bare, this part's not. There's stuff here. Is it the same stuff that's over there? Just the amount of observation that immediately happened when I brought this stick that would have outside just been a stick, but inside became something just incredible. It's amazing. And like y'all said, adapting to unexpected things and prepare to be surprised. Finding evidence of beavers in the middle of the city along the creek was pretty exciting for us. I had a maintenance worker walk up and say, I have something for you in the middle of a preschool program, opened his hand, and I had a baby painted turtle in my hand. Okay, what am I going to do now? But we got to see some more emerge from the nest that the maintenance worker had found, and he was so excited to share this with me and with all of the preschoolers that I was working with that day. The surprise on the right was, so it's a worm. That's not necessarily surprising. What was surprising was that this was the week of Valentine's Day in Minnesota last winter. And that worm just went right onto our mat in the middle of our early childhood program. So it was astonishing for us to see a worm when most of us hadn't seen one since September, October. It was an exciting time. After that, you can see the hearts on the rug. The kids and their grown-ups took it upon themselves to make a little heart for the woods that we explore each week. And that is where I'm going to end after that small fire hose of practical things. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Bethany. I love how so much of what you do is just about encouraging observation and open wondering and placing value on just noticing things. And I think that's really lovely. All right, I'm going to steal the screen share back for just a second. I do want to be conscious of our time and say that we are at time, and if you need to head out, know that this webinar has been recorded, and I will send a link to everyone who registered. And if you need a letter for one contact hour for some professional development, you can email us to request that at k12lab@cornell.edu, and I'll get that to you ASAP. But I also, if you have a moment to stick around, and if our panelists have a couple extra minutes to stick around, I do want to throw it out and offer the opportunity to ask these amazing panelists some questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat window and I will ask them out. Yeah, and then while you are all typing and thinking about your questions, I do want to kind of throw this out to our panelists. What is one thing you wish somebody had told you before you took students out for the first time?
I could say something to ask students what they're allergic to.
Oh, that's such a good
It's
point.
important to go to the nursing and find out that list, what students are allergic to, and if any things needed before they go outdoors.
Fantastic point. Yeah, Keandra.
I wish that, I mean, with 27 years of teaching, I probably should have figured this out on my own, but I wish that I had explicitly thought to say, do not put anything that we find outside in your mouth with my junior high students. And that the word fruit does not mean it's edible. And they just, yeah, that would have been good.
Great point. Okay. Well, I don't know if the panelists, if you can see the chat window right now, but there's a lot of appreciation for you all and for you sharing your experiences that I would really love to echo. It's so wonderful to hear how everyone approaches outdoor learning in exciting ways. And I did have a couple other questions, but in my many windows, I have lost the list. So let me just see if I can find that. Here we go. All right, so when you are thinking back on your experiences outside, what has been one of the most challenging parts or one of the most rewarding parts? You can do both or either.
I guess I'll jump in and say I think the most it's both the most challenging and the most rewarding is the the students who have an expert mind and think I don't like nature, there's nothing out there that I'm going to enjoy, and uh, finding the just the right route to get them sparked. And for me, it's generally I bring a spotting scope out and I put it on a bird super up close. We have some red-tailed hawks who hang out on one of the football lights, and that oh wow, that I love those moments. I'm almost grateful that they were resistant to going outside because then they see wow, there's something out here that's really cool.
I think one of my favorite parts of almost every week is I have a group of 3 and 4-year-olds at a preschool that I visit every single Monday. And I'm with them for an hour. And part of what we do each week is um, I tried it a year or so ago. I give them 10 seconds of silence, and we take 10 seconds and are just completely silent and notice what's around us. And it's preschoolers. You wouldn't think it was possible. But like I'll put my hands up, and generally they kind of just hit the deck. They all want to lay on the ground and just listen. And usually by the end of that 10 seconds, they go again, and then we do another 10 seconds. And it's one of my favorite parts of my whole week. They have this capacity to listen, and they're so excited to notice what's going on around them. And being outside and being in this different environment is letting them do something that seems almost impossible, to have 17 preschoolers be silent together.
Mm. Can I ask a quick follow-up question? Was that something that happened like the first time you asked, or did it take like a couple times doing the 10 seconds of silence before they started to react that way?
It took a few times. They were pretty good with it the first time, but now it's become such a routine that like there was one day it snowed, most of them didn't have snow pants, and they're like, no, well, this is the time when I lay on the ground. I'm still doing it. And they were just thrilled and brushed themselves off, and it worked out okay. But it's always a little bit of a struggle the first time or two, but by the third time they're like, yes, yes.
I think that's such a great practical example of something that I have heard from educators multiple times is sometimes it takes a few times, and the first couple times you take kids outside can be pretty hairy, but if you can stick with it, you can start to develop practices. And sometimes that's something I'll suggest to teachers is like the first time you go outside, don't plan on teaching content. Just plan on figuring out how to be outside together. So. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I want to thank our panelists for hanging on a little extra long, and thank all of our attendees for coming with us today. Well, I do see we did get one quick question popping into the chat window. Let's see if we can look at that real quick. You want to jump in, Keandra?
Yeah, so that's definitely I'm in a Title I school, and we've had, I don't know if you experienced this also, but we have an extraordinarily high rate of turnover in our administration. And trying to get each new administrator on board, once they see how embedded it is in the campus culture, they can't fight it because everybody that's already been there is so pro birding program and pro outdoor. And I'm the only teacher at this juncture that takes my students outside. There's 65 teachers, and they see they can't fight it. So getting that campus buy-in was so key when I first started the program, because before that, I had a lot of pushback from the PE teachers, and I went to them and I said, hey, we'll stay on this side of the fence if you guys are outside, we promise. And I have had to maintain that. And so once the administrators know that, it's really helpful. And also making sure the students understand that there are potential cuts to the outdoor education opportunities if the admin doesn't approve, and it helps to motivate the students to be really mindful of their behavior outside because they know that there are actual consequences. So I tell the administrators, if you see a problem, feel free to make us stay inside because they need to know that that's the consequence and they have to earn it back.
Thank you.
How
Can
do I
I
get?
add to it?
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah,
Oh,
yes.
okay, thank you. One way that I've tried and it's worked, building partnerships. So if you work with another educator and say you're working on a project or the PTA, that's usually helpful. Also, in terms of mathematics, the standards, a lot of it deals with graphing. So if you're doing a lot of your data collection and you're bringing into the bar graphs, the line plots, the scatter plot, the scatter, plot graphs, that could be helpful as well. And if you're also, in terms of science, if you're talking about like biomimicry and you're studying birds and then airplanes, you could tie it in that way. Those are just some ways. And definitely that's a big reason why I did Write Out Loud, because that was a big movement. And I didn't want my administration to say, why do you have to go outside, on the daily thing? Because I said, it is for 3 weeks. We have to do it. And then I justified it with the standards. So that's usually helpful. So those are some tips that I have.
Yeah. I see that there's this kind of a second part to this question about, as a non-formal educator or volunteer, how do I get teachers and admin to understand? Um, One thing that I've heard some teachers have had success with is referring to some of the research. Like, there are really great places like the Children in Nature Network that have compiled this research in really understandable ways, like those infographics. I will send the link to the Children in Nature Network, and if you go to their research tab, there's really good stuff there. Um, Sometimes, like, showing that there is a body of research there can be helpful. But also, a lot of programs that we do as non-formal educators can be aligned to standards as well. And if you help teachers see those connections, or, you could even do some like in classroom or post classroom work with folks to help them meet those standards. Those could be ways as well. I don't know, panelists, if you have additional ideas.
I have one more idea. In a lot of states, what's coming out, I know in New York State, is the computer science and digital fluency standards. So there is a component that does say, use the information and figure out a way to present it on an online platform or something like that. So, that is one way that you could address it. That's the only thought I have.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in at the moment, so I will call it there and say once again, thank you to all of our panelists so much for sharing your experience with us and your perspectives. I always feel so energized when I get to talk to some of our amazing teachers. So thank you for coming. And thank you everyone so much for attending. If you've been to several of our webinars before, this is my last one with the K-12 team, so I want to say goodbye. And thanks for everything. And again, I hope you will come join us for a future webinar. Next month in March, we're looking at how to think about refining questions for scientific questions. So if you want to do inquiry with your students, that would be a great place to start. Thank you everyone so much. Please have a wonderful night and see you at a future, well, I hope the K-12 team will see you at a future webinar. Take care, everyone.